So I'm standing inside my blacksmith shop. Doesn't look like it yet, but it's gonna. So yeah, the canoe's finished, and for those that followed our canoe build, I took it out for its maiden voyage, and I didn't really talk about how it handled. Well, it was superb. One would even say outstanding in terms of how it performed. No leaks and lots of rocker. The thing turns on a dime, and it's got a lot of freeboard, so should be able to carry quite a bit of weight. So for solo tripping, historical trekking, it's going to work really good. So my next project, if you look at our log cabin, we created a mid-1700s settler's cabin, and that is our persona, that time period. But we're going to move way forward into the future for this build, and we're going to build something sort of late 1700s, early 1800s. And the reason I decided to do that is the Industrial Revolution's sort of taken hold, and there's a lot more tools available that wouldn't have been available in the early 1700s. So yeah, let's do a little tour of it, tour of my blacksmith shop. So that's going to be a center post, and I wish I didn't need it, but from a structural point of view, I got to put a beam across the center to carry my load bearing for the roof line. So center post is going there, and over here, these 4 posts delineate where I'm going to build a stone forge. So we're trying to do this as it was done. So yeah, we're going to build that out of stone, and where this peg sits, I'm going to dig a pretty deep hole here. And I'm gonna band together with heavy steel 6 6x6s, and I'm gonna bury it 5 feet in the ground, and that's gonna be the base for my anvil. So if you can get rid of any wiggle wobble movement of the anvil, you're gonna have a really good surface to work on. So the other thing, and Chris Johnson gave me this, gifted me this, and it doesn't look like much, but it's old like me. Certainly 1800s, maybe as early as 1700s. It's hard to say. The tacks would indicate that it's quite early, or quite old. Now the wood's really manky, but I'm hoping if I'm really careful when I dissect it that I can sort of model this. So this is the throat of the bellows that I'm going to build. So the bellows are quite large to get that really hot fire that we want for forging iron. So in terms of dimensions, they're probably going to be about 5 feet, 5.5 feet long, and about 3.5 feet at their widest point. And there'll be pull bellows, so a rope by the forge to to fire up the heat. So I got to really carefully take this thing apart. I'm going to try to reuse those old tacks. Now there are modern nails in here too, so, and a wee bit of leather left on the thing. It's pretty crisp. So over the years, because those are bought nails, this thing's been rebuilt and reused. But these old handmade tacks, I don't know if we can see them really close, but it's a very talented blacksmith that can make them. So I'm going to try to preserve all those, reuse them when I wrap this with leather when it gets to that point. Anyway, I'm back in the logging business, the log peeling business. This morning, I charred the ends of the two 6x6s that will be the uprights for my door opening. That helps preserve the wood in the ground. So the first thing I'm going to do is get that door dug and in place. Then I'm going to get my anvil in place. Then I'm going to dig the hole for the forge. And I've got to pour a footer for that. So I got to be frost level. I'm going to be down 36, 40 inches deep. And the dimensions I need to build my rock forge on top of it. So lots of work to do, and it's a hot day. I picked a nice day to light a fire out here because it's hot, it's humid. Cicadas are singing in the trees, so we're well into August, and I would like to have this up and running by this fall or winter. That's my goal. So it's a stinking hot day, and I thought telling a wee bit of history would be a little cooler job than digging the two great big honking deep holes I need for my door of the blacksmith shop. So a wee bit of history about blacksmithing. The first known evidence that that the hammer was used to shape steel dates to about 1350 BC, and it comes from Egypt, and where they found a dagger. It was pretty crude, but a dagger that had been hammered out. So we're looking at a trade that is about 3,500 years old. And if you think about how essential it was, there are a number of first-person accounts where new towns in their infancy stage or villages, they needed a blacksmith. They made everything out of steel that was required to farm, for agriculture, for cooking, tool making. It was just an essential trade. So they would go to great lengths to attract them. One account I read was, I believe it was in the state of Ohio, they gave a parcel of 3 acres to a smith to attract him into their village on the shores of a river, so he'd have water power for a water-powered hammer for power forging heavier steel. There's references of them giving them rations for a couple of years, numerous references of them helping to build their shop, and I'm wondering where people are to help me build mine, because I seem to be all alone back here. Anyway, and that brings us to the demise of the trade, because, yeah, it's now become an artisan trade. And it only took about a 40-year window for a 3,500-year-old trade to fade into oblivion. And that period is sort of from about 1890 to about 1930, so into the 20th century. And what happens, so Henry Bessemer has invented a furnace that makes steel, but it's not very efficient. And a guy named Sidney Thomas comes along, I think it's 1885. He perfects the Bessemer furnace. And now all of a sudden, a commodity that was really a luxury item, very, very expensive, became dirt cheap. readily available. And we're entering into the Industrial Revolution where things are being mass produced. There's inventions all over the place. And as a result of that, in that roughly 40-year window from having the need and the having the essential blacksmith in every community just faded into oblivion. So with some of the things, and I find it mind-boggling, and I start to think about what transpires once we turn into the 20th century. So in 1886, just prior to the 20th century, electric welding is invented. Not perfected yet, but invented. A couple of years later, acetylene is used, or carbide gas is used in industrial welding. The first mass-produced well, it wasn't mass-produced this time, but the first I-beam ever built was built in, I believe, 1902 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Go figure. It would be Pittsburgh. They were quite the leaders in that steel industry. All of a sudden, cars, in 1900, horseless carriages or cars, there were less than 8,000 in the entire United States of America. They only had 10 miles of cement road, if you would. It was just horse trails, basically. But now we start to mass produce it. So there's a company called the Olds Company, not Oldsmobile. I'm not sure whether it turns into that company or not, but the Olds Company mass produced in the early 1900s 400 cars in their first year, 1,600 cars in their second year, and 4,000 in their third. And if we fast forward to, I'm not sure when we're talking, well, Henry Ford in Detroit, Michigan, in 1 year produced 19,051 Model T Fords. So there's a crazy change as happening. Our blacksmith now is designated as a horseshoer only, and as they say, essentially has disappeared. And sadly, with the disappearance of the blacksmith and entering into the 20th century, that era, I think, of simplicity, where life was slower, where one had to wait for stuff. There was no instant store to go pick up something. You had to go down to the village and you'd say, I need a new spatula. And the blacksmith would say, I can get around to that tomorrow. And that's how life was. It was just a much slower pace. And anyway, I digress. I've still got to get this frame put together, and I'm definitely waiting until tomorrow to dig those holes.